happens when one of Britain's most beloved actors is pushed past his breaking point. On live television, it only took 36 seconds. 36 seconds of mockery, condescension, and smug laughter before Jim Broadbent, the quiet gentleman of British cinema, did something he had never done in his entire career. He walked off set, mid-interview, leaving the cameras rolling and a host who suddenly remembered that respect costs nothing. That morning, Jim arrived at the studio as he always did. Modest, punctual, kind. He greeted the crew, chatted with the makeup artist, thanked the sound technician. He was there to talk about his new film, to share stories, to celebrate the craft he's devoted his life to. When he walked onto the set, the audience applauded. Jim smiled, gave a small wave, settled into his chair, and waited for the conversation to begin. Lorraine Kelly started innocently enough, until she didn't. "So, Jim," she said, smiling too widely, "you're getting on a bit now, aren't you? Ever think about retiring? Let the younger actors have a go." The audience went silent. You could feel the discomfort spread through the room like static. Jim's smile faltered, just for a heartbeat, before he recovered. "Well," he said gently, "I love what I do. As long as directors want to work with me and I'm still capable, I'll keep going. Age brings experience. I hope that shows in my work." It was a graceful answer. Measured, dignified, exactly what you'd expect from him. Lorraine didn't even blink. She leaned back, laughed. Not with him, but at him. "Oh, come on. You can't be serious. All these young, handsome actors coming through. Surely you think my time's up? Nobody wants to see an old man on screen anymore, do they?" The camera caught it. The tightening of Jim's jaw. The flicker in his eyes. He was deciding, in real time, whether to defend himself or to let it slide. He chose grace again. "Audiences appreciate good storytelling," he said quietly. "Some of the greatest performances in cinema have come from older actors." He was offering her an exit, a chance to recover her dignity. She didn't take it. "Yes, but you're not exactly a leading man, are you?" She pressed. "More of a, what do they call it? A character actor." The quirky sidekick. "Do you ever wish you'd been born better looking? Maybe then you'd have been a real star." The silence that followed was suffocating. Crew members stared at each other. The cameras kept rolling. Because what else could they do? Jim sat perfectly still. Then he looked up, eyes steady. "I've had a very fulfilling career," he said. "I've worked with remarkable people. I don't measure my worth by standards of attractiveness." It was poised, unshakable. But Lorraine wasn't done. "That's a very diplomatic way of saying you're not conventionally attractive." She laughed. "Must be hard, though, watching people like George Clooney get all the attention while you're stuck playing the funny little man in the background." That was the moment something changed. You could see it. The quiet man's patience reach its limit. "I think," Jim said slowly, "that you're being incredibly rude." Lorraine's face lit up. She thought she'd struck gold. A viral moment. She didn't realize she'd just stepped over a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "Oh, don't be so sensitive!" She waved him off. "I'm just having a bit of fun." "Can't you take a joke?" Jim stood up. No dramatics, no shouting, just quiet finality. He unclipped his microphone. "What are you doing?" Lorraine asked, her confidence wavering. "I'm leaving," he said simply. "I came here to talk about my work, not to be insulted for your amusement." Lorraine's smile froze, the brittle kind that hides panic. "Come on, Jim. Don't be silly, sit down. We're just chatting." Jim placed the microphone gently on the chair. He looked at her. Not with anger, but disappointment. "Chatting involves mutual respect," he said. "You've made it clear you have none for me. So I won't sit here and let you continue." Then he turned to the audience. "I'm sorry to cut this short. You deserve better than to see someone treated this way. And I deserve better than to be treated this way." At first, there was only silence, then a single pair of hands clapping, then another and another. Within seconds, the whole audience was on its feet, applauding the man who chose dignity over spectacle. Lorraine sat frozen, her expression flickering between confusion, irritation, and something that looked dangerously close to regret. "Jim, please," she said finally, her voice softer now, smaller. "Don't do this. We can talk about the film." But Jim Broadbent was already walking away, calm, resolute, and entirely unbroken. Lorraine tried to laugh, the sound brittle in the air. "Well," she said, forcing a smile, "I suppose some people just can't handle a bit of banter." No one laughed, not a single person. The audience stared back at her, faces blank, eyes hard. The silence was heavier than any applause. In the front row, a woman shook her head slowly, deliberately. The camera caught it, a moment that would be replayed across social media thousands of times before the day was over. Lorraine shifted in her chair, papers trembling slightly in her hands. "We'll, be right back after this short break," she managed. The red light above the camera blinked off. Instantly, the studio erupted. Producers rushed onto the set, headsets crackling with overlapping voices. The floor manager barked orders. Someone swore under their breath. Lorraine sat frozen, still gripping her cue cards, her composure unraveling by the second. Jim Broadbent was already gone, past the cameras, past the producers frantically whispering damage control, past the crew members who nodded quietly as he walked by. He didn't say another word. He didn't need to. Back on set, Lorraine's smile had vanished. In its place was something raw, confusion, maybe fear. Because the truth had just revealed itself in front of everyone. Beneath the warmth of her television persona was someone who thought cruelty was content. In 5 minutes, the illusion had shattered. When they returned from commercial, Lorraine's tone was different, flat, mechanical. She read her lines like someone reciting an apology they hadn't yet written. The sparkle was gone, the confidence drained. She looked like a person trying to wake up from a mistake she couldn't undo. And still, the camera betrayed her. Every few minutes, her eyes drifted to the empty chair beside her. His chair. As if she couldn't quite believe it was really empty. The next guests felt it too. The cookbook author smiled politely but kept her answers short. The musician who followed spoke carefully, his eyes darting toward the exit between sentences. Nobody wanted to linger. Nobody wanted to be next. Lorraine tried to fill the silence with exaggerated laughter, with overblown enthusiasm, but it only made the air heavier. Every joke fell flat, every transition clumsy. It was like watching someone drown in real time, grasping for a tone that no longer existed. Because Jim Broadbent's absence wasn't just visible, it was palpable. The chair he'd left behind wasn't empty. It was occupied by the weight of what had happened, and the audience could feel it. In those few quiet minutes of live television, 2 truths had been revealed. Lorraine Kelly had shown what happens when mockery masquerades as charm, and Jim Broadbent had shown something far rarer, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away. No anger, no shouting, just the unshakable calm of someone who knows his worth and refuses to let anyone diminish it. The interview that was meant to run 15 minutes had ended in less than 5. 5 minutes for a reputation to crumble. 5 minutes for a lesson in dignity to echo far beyond the studio walls. It took 5 minutes. 5 minutes for one of Britain's most beloved morning hosts to go from national favorite to cautionary tale. And through it all, Jim Broadbent never once lost his composure. That perhaps was the cruelest blow of all for Lorraine, because there was no way to spin it, no way to paint him as temperamental or unreasonable. The footage showed everything. Her tone, her words, her smirk, her complete disregard for a man who had earned respect 1,000 times over. Jim Broadbent had built his reputation the quiet way, through decades of consistent grace. He showed up early, knew his lines, treated everyone on set with kindness. Never scandal, never ego, never a raised voice. Just the work. Steady, devoted, honest. Kings and beggars, heroes and fools. He'd played them all with the same truth. And in one morning, Lorraine Kelly decided none of that mattered, that she could turn a national treasure into a punchline, that his age and appearance were fair game, if it meant a few cheap laughs. She gambled that he'd stay seated, that professionalism would keep him trapped in that chair, that his need to promote his film would outweigh his need for self-respect. She gambled wrong. The audience's reaction told the story better than any headline ever could. They didn't laugh. They didn't clap at her jokes. They just sat there, uneasy, until Jim stood up, and then they rose with him. A standing ovation for a man who refused to be demeaned. They knew what they'd witnessed. They could feel the difference between teasing and cruelty, between banter and bullying. And when Lorraine crossed that invisible line, they saw it immediately and sided with the man who wouldn't take it. That was what made the moment so powerful. It wasn't just about one actor walking off one show. It was about something larger. How we treat people who have given us their craft, their time, their decades of quiet excellence. Jim Broadbent didn't owe Lorraine Kelly his composure. He didn't owe her a smile to make her mockery easier to digest. He didn't owe her his dignity. He owed himself better. And he gave himself better by leaving. The interview that should have happened was obvious. The film, the performance, the creative process, the collaboration. There were 100 questions she could have asked, each one an opportunity to reveal insight, to inspire, to honor the work. But she chose spectacle over substance. She decided that provocation was more valuable than professionalism, that a viral moment mattered more than a meaningful one, and it backfired spectacularly. Jim's walkout wasn't staged. It wasn't a publicity trick. It was the quiet decision of a man pushed past his limit. You could see it. The pause before he stood, the calm precision as he removed his microphone, the soft apology he offered to the audience. Those were not the gestures of anger. They were the movements of a man reclaiming his self-respect. Lorraine's attempts to deflect only deepened the wound, calling it banter, suggesting he was too sensitive, turning the blame on him rather than confronting her own cruelty. It was a masterclass in denial. And then came that silent rebuke. The woman in the front row shaking her head, slow and deliberate. A gesture that captured what the nation felt. Shame on her behalf. This wasn't about a man who couldn't take a joke. It was about a man who refused to let disrespect masquerade as humor. Jim Broadbent left that studio with his dignity intact, and in the process, elevated it. He reminded everyone watching that kindness is not weakness, and professionalism is not submission. That sometimes the most powerful statement isn't confrontation, it's walking away. Lorraine Kelly was left alone with the echo of her own choices, staring at the empty chair that told the story better than words ever could. A symbol of the respect she'd squandered, the conversation that would never happen, the bridge she'd burned. And all of it, every second of it, because she forgot the simplest truth of broadcasting. A host's job is to elevate, not to humiliate, to listen, not to belittle, to make space for others, not to fill it with cruelty disguised as wit. Jim Broadbent understood that. That's why he'd lasted decades in an industry built on ego and artifice. Because he knew that real greatness isn't in domination, it's in dignity. 5 minutes. That's all it took for Lorraine Kelly to go from beloved morning television host to cautionary tale. And through it all, Jim Broadbent had maintained his dignity. And that was perhaps the most devastating part for Lorraine. She couldn't spin it, couldn't paint him as difficult or temperamental. The footage didn't lie. It captured every word, every smirk, every condescending tone that stripped away any illusion of professionalism. Jim Broadbent had spent a lifetime being everything Lorraine wasn't that morning. Consistent, gracious, grounded. He'd built his career on craft and character, not spectacle. He wasn't the loudest or the flashiest, but he was the one everyone trusted. The one who showed up early, knew everyone's name, stayed humble when others lost their footing. For decades, he'd represented the best of what the industry could be. Serious work done with quiet excellence. And in a single morning, Lorraine decided none of that mattered. That the weight of a lifetime's respect could be traded for a few viral clips. She thought she could turn his age into a punchline, his composure into an obstacle. She thought he'd laugh along. He didn't. When the laughter failed to come, when the audience's silence grew heavy and uncomfortable, it was Jim, not Lorraine, who restored grace to the room. His decision wasn't loud or dramatic. It was deliberate, precise, and deeply human. He stood, unclipped his microphone, and said softly, "I think we're done here." And then he left. No shouting, no scene. Just a man reclaiming his dignity in real time. Lorraine Kelly forgot the first rule of the job. You're not the story. And in forgetting it, she created a moment that would define her career in ways she never intended. The interview that never finished. The actor who walked away. The host who went too far. It became a cautionary tale about power and respect. About the responsibility that comes with having a platform. About the razor-thin line between entertainment and exploitation. Jim Broadbent didn't need to defend himself afterwards. He didn't issue a statement or chase sympathy. He didn't need to. His silence was the statement. He'd drawn a line, quietly, firmly, irrevocably. He showed that even in a business that rewards as compliance and punishes defiance, there are still limits worth defending. That dignity is not negotiable. That you can say enough without raising your voice. The 36 seconds that changed everything weren't cinematic or explosive. They were steady, calm, and unforgettable. A man choosing himself over a segment. A moment so simple it became seismic. The empty chair he left behind said more than Lorraine ever could. It said that respect matters. That kindness matters. That even the most composed people have boundaries. And that crossing them has consequences. Jim Broadbent walked out with his integrity intact and his legacy burnished. He reminded everyone watching that grace isn't weakness and that silence can echo louder than outrage. Lorraine Kelly sat there in the wreckage of her own making, realizing too late that cruelty isn't charisma and provocation isn't power. Some lines, once crossed, cannot be uncrossed. Some words once spoken cannot be unspoken. And some people, once disrespected, will simply stand up and walk away, taking their dignity with them, and leaving behind only a lesson for anyone still paying attention.